Who has been in my class before? Okay, you guys, what do I like to talk about a lot? Does anybody remember?
The existence of God.
The existence of God and the proof of the existence of God. The reason why this is what we study. It's kind of my thing because I know how it bothered me when I was a kid. Whenever I would ask a question and people would just, they would take out, they'd take out the Bible and they'd give me the answer from the Bible, and I was kind of like, okay, why is this what we study? What makes this the place I need to go for all the answers? Okay? And if you, like I said, if you don't answer these questions in your head, eventually they're going to start attacking your heart, and they're going to be a problem for your faith. And a lot of you kids know, I've left church for a while. I mean, I had questions. I grew up in a conservative little church up in western Kentucky. Went to church every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. If there was a gospel meeting, I was there. I was the model kid. Went to Freed Hardeman thinking, well, finally it's going to be easy to be a Christian, and got up there and was actually confronted with more opportunities to do things that my mom and daddy told me not to do than I ever was in high school. And I thought, well, nobody's doing what they say they're doing anyway, and I finally just got tired of trying because it just didn't seem real anymore. And a lot of the reasons why it didn't seem real is because I had questions about why do we study this, and nobody was answering my questions. And that's why I'm just kind of pounding you guys over the head with this, man. I want y'all to understand the answers are out there. You can believe this is what you need to be studying without a doubt. We look to a guy named Josh McDowell. I don't know if I've mentioned him to you too many times. This guy, this book is a big, thick, scary book, I know. But it is probably one of the coolest books ever put together about the evidence for Christ. And you can actually go online on YouTube and you can Google, I think it's Evidence That Demands a Verdict. Josh McDowell, and it is a 6-part series on YouTube because you can only do YouTube like 10 minutes at a time. And the thing that kind of struck me is there are YouTube videos that go viral. Well, when I don't know, I guess it's because I'm just real interested in this, but he's good. And his first video had been viewed 24,000 times. That's not that much. Think about the population of this country and how many people call themselves Christians. How many people are really digging in and trying to understand why they call themselves a Christian? And you're going to hear me say it 100 times. If you don't understand why you call yourself a Christian, what eats in your mind is going to eat at your heart. And I'm thinking, this guy is the renowned person on Christian evidence. He does a fantastic presentation. 24,000 people have watched that first video. And then as you go through the videos and go on down, the second video had been viewed only 10,000 times. The third one, 9,000. The fourth one, 6,000. And the last two, the fifth and sixth one, about 5,000 or 6,000 hits. That's it. We have just about that many people in the church. Think about that. Here's solid information that proves in anyone's mind that if you objectively look at this material, you can go on and watch his YouTubes. It might take you an hour to go through all of them. And you will go, wow, I feel really good about what I believe now. And those last two have only been viewed about 5,000 or 6,000 times. Those are the kinds of things that in the Christian world, man, we need to make viral. People need to be seeing this. We need to know this stuff. So let's first look at the timeline as to when this stuff was written. When they wrote text back years ago, what did they write on, guys? Papyrus. That's right. Do you think that paper holds up? Mr. McDowell gets into this on his lesson. He talks about they found an old document and pulled it out of it had been sealed up in some clay jars, and before they had a chance to really see what it was all about, they took it out and held it up in the sun and it just disintegrated. Just fell apart. So, unfortunately, the things that they wrote on, it's very hard to say, I have a copy of what was written when it was written, because the stuff fell apart. So when they're looking at things that were written in ancient times, they call them documents of antiquity. When they start looking at those and trying to determine if they can be trusted, one of the first things they look at is how far is from the time it was written to the first copy that we have. Who has read the works of Caesar? Do you think if you were to go into Vanderbilt University and talk to a history professor that you could talk them out of believing that Caesar really lived? Does anybody doubt Caesar lived? Does anybody doubt that? The timeline for what they have when his stuff was written to when they have the first copies is 1,000 years. In other words, we don't have any copies that are closer to 1,000 years old from when he wrote them to when we have a copy, 1,000 years. But lest anybody at Vanderbilt, Harvard, any of the big universities would say, well, yes, Caesar is a character of history. We know he was here. Plato, who's heard of Plato? His writings, the timeline between when they were written and when we have a first copy, 1,200 years. 1,200 years. Who knows Aristotle? The time from when he wrote to when we have our first copy, 1,400 years. Now, the works of the New Testament, the writings of the apostles, one of the early Christian writers, when they would come together, they didn't say, we pulled out our New Testament and studied. This is like in the first century after Christ was here. Would read from the memoirs of the apostles. I mean, that's how they referred to them. Some people called it the divine library. I mean, it was called a lot of things before it became what we call the New Testament in the Bible. But when it comes to the New Testament writings, the works of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Paul, what do you think about the timeline there from when it was written to when we have the first copy? 50 to 75 years. And there have been new discoveries made in recent archaeological findings that put it at about 30. That's crazy, folks. People who are honest, who know documents of antiquity, they would look at that and go, there's no way you can refute what's been written. One of the other guidelines that they use when it comes to believing that you have a document from antiquity that's authentic is how many copies do you have? Let's look at the same ones. In Caesar's works, how many copies do you think we have? The only copies that they have 10 copies. 10 copies, okay? And they think that's fantastic. They're excited. Plato, how many copies? Anybody got a guess?
50.
7. Plato. Aristotle, anybody got a guess? 49. Now, we didn't talk about Homer and the Iliad as far as the timeline. It is one that they consider a big deal because they have so many copies. Who's read Homer and the Iliad? Yeah, I know. But anyway, I don't know why they make that's what turns kids against reading. I'm just saying. But anyway, I mean, really, I love to read, and I thought I hated to read for years because they made me read that stuff. And then when I finally, could go and get something that I enjoyed reading, all I do is read now. So please don't let all the classics and all this, old literature of antiquity turn you off reading. But anyway, that's a side point. Homer was the one that they're really excited about. How many copies do you think they've got? It's higher. How many do you think? 643. Okay? What about the New Testament? Some of you that have been in my class before may know this. How many copies do we have of the New Testament? Well, in the 20s, but in the 24,000 is the number. Okay? 24,633. Do y'all get this? People who don't believe in Christ and don't get that he was a historical figure that had eyewitnesses, that saw what he did, that saw the miracles that he did, and worked and ate with him after the resurrection, they just don't want to know. Lee Strobel. I love what Lee Strobel said, and I'm not sure I may have written down exactly what he said when I was looking at something the other day. But Lee Strobel was an atheist, and his wife converted to Christianity, and it just made him mad because he thought, now I'm going to have to behave myself. She's going to get all weird, and he was thinking it was going to be more like a cult. And then he saw a difference in her life and just saw where she just became just a more loving wife and a kinder and a more gentle person. And he's like, well, maybe there's something to this, and I love her, so I need to study it. And he got to looking in and digging into the evidence. That's the same reason this book was written, because this man didn't believe in Christ. And just like John Clayton, who y'all have heard me talk about, he's the one who talks about how we can believe the creation, was made by God. When they got to digging through this stuff and trying to disprove it, they proved it to themselves and converted themselves. To what Lee Strobel said, he was an atheist. And so as he started digging through the evidence, his statement was the evidence became so strong for Christ that it required more faith for me to stay an atheist than it was to become a Christian. So when people really honestly look at the evidence of Christ It literally takes more faith for them to not believe than to believe.